They called my husband not the real dad on the mic at our daughter's wedding, in front of everyone. They laughed until I took that microphone and told them who actually raised my kids, who paid for the entire wedding, and why the loser they mocked is the only real man in this family. By the end of the night, people were afraid to even look him in the eye. If you've ever watched someone you love get disrespected by your own blood, watch this all the way through, because I'm going to show you exactly how I flipped that room, exposed every fake relative, and walked out with all the power. My name is Danielle. I'm 46 years old. And before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The wedding hall smelled like white roses and candle wax. Strings of soft gold light shimmered above every table, catching the edges of champagne flutes and sequined dresses. You could feel the warmth in the room, hugs and laughter and the good kind of chaos. My husband stood beside me at our daughter's wedding reception. His suit was sharp, charcoal, and simple, the kind he only wears for big moments. His hands were folded in front of him, the way he always stands when he feels a little out of place, but refuses to show it. Quiet, but proud. He does not need the spotlight. But that night, I wished he had it. Our daughter was glowing near the edge of the dance floor with her new husband, veil off, hair a little looser than it had been at the church. She threw her head back when she laughed, the same way she did when she was 8 and I pushed her on the swings. For a while, it felt like we had done it. We had taken the broken pieces of our past and somehow smoothed them into something solid. We had raised a family from pieces and built something that felt whole. Then the microphone passed. I do not even remember who handed it off at first. Someone from my side, maybe my cousin Brent. Tipsy, cheeks flushed, shoulders loose, grinning like he was proud of his own voice before he had even used it. He clinked his glass like it was still 2002, and he was still the loudest one at every party. He lifted the microphone and cleared his throat with too much confidence. People turned toward him with that polite wedding attention, expecting a harmless joke, a sweet story, something light they could smile at while they finished their drinks. Brent said, "Let's hear it for the stepdad, not the real father." But he tried. A few people laughed. Not many. The kind that comes when people are not sure if they are supposed to think something is funny. Some looked down at their plates. One of my daughter's college friends winced and mouthed, "What?" to the girl next to her. I felt my chest tighten before I could stop it. Like someone had reached into the middle of all that warmth and pinched the air out of it. But my husband did not flinch. He did what he always does, lowered his eyes. He folded his hands a little tighter in front of him. He took the hit and disappeared into himself so that no one else would feel uncomfortable. The silence that followed settled slowly, like fog creeping in, soft but suffocating. From across the room, I could see my daughter's back stiffen. She did not turn around, but I watched her hand drop from her husband's arm. One of my sons stared at the floor, his jaw tight, the muscle in his cheek jumping the way it did when he was a teenager trying not to cry. The music had already started fading for the speeches, but now it felt gone entirely, like someone had pulled the plug on the night. And I stood there, one hand resting on the back of my husband's chair, feeling the solid wood under my fingertips, the other clenched around my napkin. That white linen suddenly felt like sandpaper against my skin, rough and wrong in a room that had been soft only a minute before. The man Brent was mocking was not just my husband. He was the man who tucked in my kids when their biological father did not show up. The man who sat on the edge of their beds, listening to stories about their days even when he came home bone-tired. The man who bought groceries when I could not stretch child support far enough. The man who stayed through late notices and court dates and slammed doors. But Brent thought it was funny. He thought being a stepdad meant almost, like there was some invisible scale that measured love and only counted what shared blood could provide. like love needed a lab result to be considered real. I did not yell. I did not storm. I did not look around to see who agreed with me. I did not ask for permission. I stood up slowly. I felt the chair legs scrape lightly against the floor as I stepped away. My heart was beating fast, but my mind was suddenly very clear, the way it gets when you know there is a line and it has just been crossed. I walked over to Brent and the MC, and I reached for the microphone. I smiled. Not the polite smile you give relatives you do not like. A different one. The kind of smile that says, "I heard you, and you are about to hear me." I said, "Since we are talking about parenting, let us be clear." The room froze. It was quieter than that. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. A chair creaked as someone shifted and then stilled. Glasses hovered just short of lips. A woman near the bar reached up and touched her necklace. I could feel eyes on me. Some curious, some nervous, a few already defensive, because they knew exactly who I was talking about even before I finished my sentence. I said, "The man sitting next to me did not have to be here. He did not have to raise kids that were not his. He chose to. Every single day. Through homework and heartbreak, doctor visits and tuition, Thanksgiving turkeys and late-night fevers." I heard someone suck in a breath. I watched one of my aunts shift in her seat. Brent tried to cut in, his voice suddenly smaller. "Hey, I did not mean... It was just a joke." I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on the room and said, "And this wedding, every flower, every meal, every song you are enjoying, was paid for by the man you just called a loser." It hit the room like a dropped wine glass. You know the sound, that thin, sharp crack that slices through everything else and cannot be unheard. A few gasps slipped out before people could swallow them back. No one moved. Even the DJ paused the track. I still did not look at my husband. Not yet. I looked at the faces instead. Every relative who had made him feel less than over the years, even if they never said it out loud. Every person who had asked about my ex in front of him, like the man actually raising the kids was a placeholder. Every passive-aggressive comment about real dads. Every time he had been left out of family photos and holiday planning. Heat rose in my chest, not from shame, but from something very close to anger and very close to love. So I kept going. "He did not just try," I said, my voice steady. "He succeeded. More than the man who gave them his last name ever did." Brent looked pale. Whatever was left of his drunken bravado had drained out of his face. Someone behind him whispered, "Wow," under their breath. I handed the microphone back to the MC and turned away. The walk back to my seat felt longer than it had a few minutes earlier. My husband was watching me. His eyes were soft, but there was a shine in them that had not been there before. A glassy brightness that said more than words could have. He did not say anything at first. He just reached for my hand under the table and held it like it meant everything, like I had just handed him back a part of himself he had quietly given up trying to protect. In that moment, I did not just feel like his wife. I felt like his witness, his defender, his proof that he had not imagined the years he had poured into children who did not share his DNA, into a home that did not carry his name at first, into a family that some people still refused to see as fully his. That room would never see him the same way again. Not because he changed that night, but because I finally held up a mirror and showed them what they had refused to see. I drew a line around the life we had built and said, "This counts. This is real. This matters. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And do not forget to subscribe for more stories like this." The applause didn't come right away. It crept in, scattered and unsure, like people testing ice with the toe of a boot. Then it stopped altogether. Silence can be louder than shouting. That was the silence hanging over the reception hall in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. I sat back down beside my husband. My legs felt steady. My heart did not. He leaned in, his voice low, careful, like he didn't want to disturb whatever fragile balance I had just shifted. Him. You didn't have to do that. I looked straight ahead, watched my daughter finally turn around. Her eyes were wet, not broken, just awake. Me. Yes, I did. Because that moment didn't start at the wedding. It started years earlier, in smaller rooms, quieter insults, softer erasures. I met my husband when my kids were still young, back when backpacks were bigger than their bodies and the house smelled like peanut butter and laundry soap. Their biological father had already learned the art of absence, missed birthdays, late child support, excuses stacked like unpaid bills. By then, I had learned how to paste on a smile at school concerts while other parents sat in matching pairs. I told myself I did not need anyone, that needing someone was a luxury I could not afford. My husband never asked to replace anyone. He just showed up. He showed up fixing a cabinet door that would not close. He showed up with a spare umbrella at soccer practice when the sky opened up and other dads stayed in their cars. He showed up on nights when all 3 kids were sick and I could not remember the last time I slept. He sat on the couch with a thermometer and cartoons playing low, whispering, "You can rest. I've got them." He was there for parent-teacher conferences where teachers assumed he was just the mom's husband. We sat in those tiny chairs while they talked about reading levels and behavior charts. They shook his hand like he was a visitor. He nodded politely when relatives said things like, "It's great you help out." Help out. As if raising children was a side job. As if his love came with an asterisk. Some betrayals don't leave bruises, just silence. And silence can rot a man from the inside if you let it. Not all at once. Slowly, in the way he stops correcting people when they introduce him as stepdad, with a certain tone. In the way he backs out of discipline conversations because he is not sure anyone sees him as having the right. Over the years, I watched him absorb it all. The sideways jokes at 4th of July cookouts. "Man, you really took on a package deal." The comments at Thanksgiving tables. "Bet their real dad is grateful you're doing the heavy lifting," Aunt Linda once said, smiling too wide while passing the mashed potatoes. Linda. "Well, you know kids always want their real dad." My husband had just refilled everyone's water glasses. His hands paused for half a second, just enough for me to see it. Then he kept going. The pitcher tilted, the ice clinked, and he acted like he had not heard. But when he sat back down, his shoulders were lower. He focused a little too hard on cutting his turkey. He laughed at a joke that was not funny because staying quiet seemed safer than saying, "That hurt." That night, after everyone left, the house settled into post-holiday stillness. Dirty dishes soaking in the sink. A faint smell of gravy and cinnamon hanging in the air. He sat at the kitchen table with the mail spread out. Walmart receipts, school forms, a Medicare pamphlet for my mother I had forgotten to file. I wiped down the counter, watching him sort envelopes like they were more complicated than they were. Me. "You okay?" He did not look up at first. He shrugged. That same, small, practiced shrug he used every time he decided not to make things harder for me. Him. "I'm fine." He wasn't. But love sometimes looks like swallowing pain so other people don't choke on it. Like deciding your hurt can wait because the person you love already has too much on her plate. The wedding planning brought it all back to the surface. Who was paying for what? Who got thanked? Who got included in the sentimental parts? Our paychecks funneled toward deposits and due dates. Checks were written from our joint account. Deposits sent by USPS certified mail. Venue contracts notarized at the county clerk. Our signatures sat side by side on every page, even when people talked like he was only half in this family. And still, Some relatives spoke like he was a guest, a plus one. They asked whether her real dad would walk her down the aisle, as if the man who stayed was the understudy. Back at the reception, after my speech, the air felt heavier but truer, like the room had shifted a few inches into alignment. I noticed something else. Brent wasn't laughing anymore. He kept rubbing his palms on his suit pants like he wanted to wipe the moment off himself. His eyes flicked from table to table, searching for someone who would save him with a joke or a shrug. My sister leaned closer. Her perfume followed her, sharp and floral. "Sister, you embarrassed him." Her voice was tight, controlled, like she was trying to hold the night together by herself. I turned slowly, met her eyes. Me. No. I stopped protecting him from consequences. She opened her mouth, closed it. There was a flash of something in her face, pride or guilt or both, before she leaned back and sipped her drink. Across the room, my daughter finally walked toward us. Her dress whispered along the floor. She stopped in front of my husband. "Daughter, I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. She didn't say for what. She didn't need to. My husband stood up, taller than he looked a moment earlier. He smoothed the front of his jacket like he needed something for his hands to do. Him. "Hey, it's okay." He tried to give her the easy way out. He always does. She shook her head. "Daughter. No, it's not. I should have shut that down before you had to." Her eyes shone. Her lip trembled. Then she stepped in and hugged him. She hugged him tight, arms around his neck, cheek pressed against his shoulder. The kind of hug you give when you suddenly see someone clearly and wonder how long they have been standing there, waiting for you to notice. He wrapped his arms around her, hesitant for half a breath. Then, he let himself hold her like the father he had been for years behind the scenes. And in that moment, I knew the power had shifted. Not because of money, not because of a microphone, but because the truth had finally been said out loud. And once the truth is out, it does not fit back into the small, neat box people kept it in. Later that night, as plates were cleared and the DJ tried to restart the mood, Brent approached our table. The lights were lower now. He smelled like whiskey and nerves. "Brent, I was joking. You know that, right?" He hovered beside my chair, trying to sound casual. His tie was crooked. His smile did not reach his eyes. I folded my napkin. Slow. Deliberate. "Me. Jokes are supposed to be funny." He laughed once. Too loud. "Brent, come on. Don't make this a thing." I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who had always gotten away with comments like that because no one wanted to ruin the mood. "Me. You already did." He stared at me for a second. Then he looked away. He walked off without another word, shoulders tight, hands shoved into his pockets like he was trying to disappear into his own suit. And I realized something then. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands up when it's had enough. Sometimes it is nothing more than refusing to sit in the same old silence. She smiled like I was the joke. I made sure I was the punchline instead. That night ended differently than anyone expected. Not ruined, just rewritten. The wedding ended with polite goodbyes and longer than usual hugs. People hung on just a second too long, arms wrapped around each other like they were trying to smother something unspoken. But something had shifted. You could feel it in the way people avoided eye contact with my husband, how their gazes slid past him to the floor or the exit sign, in how they glanced over their shoulders before leaving, as if they were walking away from more than a reception. That next morning, we were back home. The quiet felt almost too loud after clinking glasses and microphone feedback and applause that didn't know what it was applauding anymore. The Ohio wind had picked up. Chill. Sharp. The kind that rattles your storm windows and makes the house creak like it's complaining. The sky was a dull, unbothered gray. The yard out front was sprinkled with wet leaves, yesterday's confetti replaced by ordinary mess. He was out in the garage, still in his dress shoes, like he had walked out there the night before and never really come back inside. The concrete floor was cold and stained, dotted with old paint and oil spots from a dozen projects he'd taken on for this family. He stood near the old coffee can where he kept loose bolts and screws, that dented thing he refused to throw away because you never know when you'll need the right size. His shoulders were slightly rounded, his hands resting on the workbench, fingers spread like he needed something solid under him. Poured him a mug of black coffee. No cream, no sugar, just how he likes it. The smell rose up and filled the kitchen, familiar and grounding. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the heat sink into my palms, then walked through the mudroom and opened the door to the garage. The air felt colder in there, like the wind had found the cracks. He didn't turn right away when he heard me. He just reached out when I got close enough, took the mug, and lifted it to his lips. He sipped, swallowed, stared straight ahead. Then he said quietly, "Him, you really didn't have to defend me like that." The words were soft, but they landed hard. So much of him lived in that one sentence. His instinct to step back, to shrink, to not cause trouble, even when he was the one being wounded. I stepped closer and set my own coffee beside his on the workbench. Me. Yes, I did. You were never just a stepfather. They were just too blind to see it. He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened for a moment, like he was chewing on something that didn't want to go down. Then he let out a breath that felt like it had been sitting in his lungs for a decade. His shoulders dropped, just a fraction, like he'd put down a bag he'd been carrying for so long he'd forgotten how heavy it was. Then he said something I'll never forget. Him. You know what hurt the most? It wasn't what he said. It's that it wasn't the first time. I stood still, because I knew exactly what he meant. There was nothing I could pretend not to understand. It had always been death by 1,000 cuts. The small, sharp ones you're told to ignore. The forgotten Father's Day cards that didn't come. The late-night realization when he washed the dishes after a family cookout that no one had thought to say, "Hey, let's take a picture with Dad." The family group texts that excluded him. Threads lighting up my phone about holidays and plans and surprises, while his number sat on the outside. He'd see me scrolling and say, "Just tell me when you need me to drive," like a chauffeur instead of a partner. And then there were the birthday packages my relatives sent to my kids. Gifts wrapped in bright paper, cards inside signed, "From your real family." Those 3 words, written in cheerful ink, carried more weight than anything inside the box. Real family. As if he were a placeholder. As if years of showing up could be erased by blood and a return address. He endured all of it without asking for credit, without demanding a different title. He just kept doing the work. Wiping tears, fixing brakes, buying groceries, paying tuition. He laughed off the comments at gatherings. He filled plates and refilled glasses and quieted arguments. And the truth is, I let it happen. That's the part that still stings when I think about it. I let it happen. Not because I agreed, not because I didn't see it, but because I didn't want to start fights. Didn't want to make holidays tense. Didn't want to be the one everyone rolled their eyes at and called too sensitive. Didn't want to seem ungrateful to people who were trying. I told myself I was keeping the peace, that he knew how much he meant, that our private conversations and our life together could make up for the public slights. But trying doesn't excuse harm. And silence isn't protection if it enables cruelty. Sometimes silence is just a quieter way of saying, "I'm willing to let this continue if it keeps everyone else comfortable." After a while, we drifted into safer topics. When the rental suits were due back. When the kids might swing by to grab leftover decorations. whether we had enough food in the house or needed to run to Walmart. The everyday details sat on top of that conversation like a thin blanket. You could still feel the shape of what was underneath. Later that morning, when he went in to shower, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The house still wore the remnants of celebration, a crumpled napkin on the counter, a program folded in half next to the sink, the bouquet from the head table drooping in a vase, petals starting to fall in slow surrender. I clicked on Facebook without thinking. Habit. Distraction. The feed was flooded with photos from the wedding. My daughter glowing in her dress. My sons with loosened ties. Relatives raising glasses, captured mid-toast. One picture of my husband and me, his arm around my waist, both of us caught in a moment we didn't know anyone was saving. Then I saw it. Brent's post. His vague status sitting there like a challenge. Brent, people are so sensitive these days. Can't even make a toast without drama. No names, no direct references. Just enough so that anyone who'd been there would know exactly what he was talking about, and anyone who hadn't could fill in the blanks however they liked. There were likes, a laughing emoji, a comment. People really can't take a joke anymore. I stared at it until the words blurred. I could feel the response building in my chest. I could have typed out everything. I could have tagged him. I could have thrown the whole story into that comment section and watched it explode. I didn't comment. I didn't message him. I closed the window. Instead, I opened the folder on my laptop labeled Wedding. Not the photos, the paperwork. The part no one wanted to talk about when they were making jokes about real fathers. I pulled up the wedding invoice under my husband's name. His name at the top. The $28,000 at the bottom that covered everything from the venue to the flowers to the custom playlist the DJ played. Every rented chair. Every plated meal. Every little detail people had enjoyed without knowing who quietly wrote the checks. Paid in full. By him. I hit print. The old printer whirred to life, dragging the paper through, stamping our reality on the page. Then I opened the family group email from last year, the one where we'd first talked about costs. I found my husband's message, carefully worded, honest, generous. I'd like to pay for the wedding, he'd written. It's important to me that she has the day she wants. Right under it, Brent's reply. Brent, email. We'll show him the appreciation he deserves. I printed that too. Watched the words appear, pixel by pixel, promise by promise. From the drawer with our important documents, I pulled out a copy of our joint deed from the county office, the one with both our names. His listed first. Proof, in legal ink, that this house, this mortgage, this life, was his as much as mine. I boxed the printouts, found a plain brown box in the pantry, placed the invoice inside. Then the email, then the deed, on top, like a quiet period at the end of a long sentence. I closed the flaps, taped it shut, wrote Brent's address on the front, sent it to Brent, certified USPS. No emojis, no caption, no LOL, no note. Just the facts. Because I didn't ruin him. I didn't twist his words or exaggerate what happened. I just stopped protecting him from consequences. 3 days later, Brent called. His name lit up my phone while I was wiping crumbs off the kitchen table. I watched it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. He texted instead. Brent. Okay, I get it. He's not just a stepdad. He's more of a man than my actual dad ever was. You happy now? I read it. Slowly. There it was. The thing he'd never have said into a microphone. The truth. Dragged out of him not by my anger, but by the weight of his own reflection in black and white. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter. Not because I wanted him to sit in it alone, but because I wasn't here to manage his shame. I wasn't here to tell him, "It's okay," and smooth it over so he could feel better about years he couldn't take back. Some lessons don't require applause, just clarity. My daughter called that night. She and her husband were back from their weekend in Asheville, suitcases half unpacked, wedding glitter probably still stuck to the soles of their shoes. Her name lit up my screen and I answered, putting her on speaker. "Daughter, I want you both to know, I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. You raised me to be better than that." Her voice sounded different, less excited, more grounded, grown. I glanced at my husband. He was sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. "Me. You're saying it now. That matters." There was a pause. I could hear her breathe, could hear a cabinet shut softly in the background. Then she said, "Daughter, he's not my stepdad. He's just Dad. He always was." The words were simple, but they cracked something open that had been sealed for years. My husband heard it on speaker. He blinked hard, then turned away like he was pretending to. Check the oven, even though there was nothing inside. His shoulders lifted once, then dropped. His hand came up to his face quickly, like he was just scratching his cheek. But I saw him swipe the corner of his eye. Him. "Love you, kiddo." His voice broke right in the middle. "Daughter." "Love you too, Dad." The call ended, but the word Dad stayed in the room like a blessing. And that's when I realized, respect isn't just earned, it's defended. It's built in years of quiet effort, and then it's shielded in the loud moments where you refuse to let anyone strip it away with a joke or a label. They called him a loser because they thought love without biology was weak, because they believed raising someone else's children made you second best, and almost a backup plan. But he wasn't second to anyone. He was the reason this family stood. The reason my kids had someone in the stands, someone at the table, someone at the door every time they came home. The reason there was even a wedding to plan and pay for. And once I reminded them of that, once I spoke it out loud and set the proof in a box and mailed it to their doorstep, they couldn't look at him the same way again. They could tell themselves I overreacted. They could whisper about me at future holidays. But underneath all of that, they knew exactly who had actually shown up. They mocked the wrong man, in front of the wrong woman, at the wrong moment. So I walked out that night not in anger, but in peace, because I knew the version of the story they were telling about the stepdad, the real dad, who counted and who didn't, had been permanently rewritten. And when I say I walked away with everything, I don't mean the decorations or the photos or their approval. I mean, I walked away with my husband's head a little higher, my daughter's truth spoken out loud, and a family story finally aligned with the reality we'd been living all along. Whatever they choose to tell themselves after that belongs to them. What we live with now belongs to us. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.